Hello, collective listeners. On today's episode, we have Bryce Biel, one of the partners at Legacy at Carbon. And man, I just want to start this off by saying we've had some amazing guests lately. We are on a roll. All guests are amazing, but these past few conversations have really just opened my eyes to different philosophies and different ways to think about the profession of strength and conditioning. And that's why I'm just so grateful to be able to be the podcast host. And thank you to Samson, one, for having the podcast, but thank you to the listeners as well for listening so we can have the podcast, because this is like my number one continued education piece. I love speaking with these coaches, and Bryce was just another exceptional conversation, really about collaboration with other coaches, understanding the bigger picture behind coaching. And I just thought it was a fantastic episode. I think the listeners will really enjoy it, and thank you for tuning in. What's going on, collective listeners? On today's episode of the Samson Strength Coach Collective, we have Bryce Biel, one of the partners at Legacy at Carbon. Bryce, thank you so much for coming on.
How are we doing, guys? I appreciate it. No, thank you. We've tried a couple times and just couldn't align all the time.
Hey,
but for everything, and obviously I listen to it, so an enjoyment for me, and obviously I listen to someone who's smarter than me in Mike, so it's funny.
Hey, well, I'll tell you this much. I think it would be the first time ever if we had an episode we scheduled, and then we're actually able to do it at the first time. That's the typical strength coach scheduling. Yeah, you usually last second call in, something like that. I was even a little late because our practice was running late today. So,
I've been there way too many times, and I'm sure everyone else.
Oh yeah.
You're expecting call, which is fine.
Yep. But sometimes, I mean, like if we just go scrimmage after scrimmage after scrimmage and we're rolling, I was like, I kept looking at my watch. I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know. So
yep, I've been there. Practice ends at 5. You don't get out till 6:30.
Yep, for sure.
Too many times.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Bryce, could you give us your background in strength and conditioning and kind of your journey, and then what's brought you currently to Legacy at Carbon?
So I'll go way back. I originally lived in Illinois. I'm from Chicago suburbs, so kind of where, if you listen to a couple episodes before, I'm like probably 15, 20 minutes away from Coach Mike Nichols, and he's in Naperville. I'm in St. Charles at that point. So I started, I think as most of us, an avid lifter at first, and then obviously like that started through high school, and I'll say my frustrations grew with myself in the sense of having, 2 meniscus surgeries by the end of 8th grade. So I became kind of infatuated with trying to kind of figure things out just a little bit. Obviously, I had no idea what was going on, but it kind of started my process, I'll say, of recovery at a very young age. So through the years, obviously loved lifting. Went to Elmhurst College, or university now, I think it is, and studied kinesiology, exercise science. Worked for a bunch of people, like everyone does, and one day I just said I want to take the risk and I want to do it myself. And I started Legacy Performance, which is originally located in Illinois. Through that, a couple other stops, random places, met a lot of awesome people. Now I'm in Franklin, Tennessee, a suburb of Nashville. My business partners are Mark Lobliner and Katie Lobliner. If you know TigerFitness.com, Ambrosia, the Outright Bar, so many more things that they own and do, business partners with them, and they got me to come down here. And that's kind of how that story started. It's an interesting one. I met Mark years ago, and we hit it off and continue to stay in contact. And one day it was just like, hey, I want to do this. And the only way I'm going to do it is if you're the one down here with me doing it. And I was like, well, I just had a kid. My gym, I was doing, I'd say, pretty well with my own thing. And I was like, man, I don't know if I could do it, because I'm so connected and intertwined with all my athletes, like anyone is. It really is a family for me, and they've, a lot of kids have seen my 2-year-old grow up over that time period. So it's hard for me to displace myself from that and my family. So, but now we're here in Legacy at Carbon in Franklin, Tennessee. So if you're ever in Nashville, let me know. I'm always here.
I've got some Tennessee roots too. I did my master's degree at University of Tennessee, so familiar with the area. But you brought up Tiger Fitness. That's insane. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, that
Yep.
yep. So obviously that's Mark. And I mean it's just been a whirlwind. It's been a breath of fresh air, and I'm sure like many people in a private facility do yourself, you're doing everything from the marketing aspect to all the coaching to all the programming to anything and everything else, cleaning the toilets, garbage. It's a lot easier when you have people that are like there to work with you and support you and like help you, and I mean, they're unbelievable. It's been literally a blessing with how easily it's worked out, and that to work with them, it's been awesome. But yeah, he's Tiger Fitness. So if you ever like see him in the video, just popping his pecs and all of a sudden, boom.
I remember I was like the plug for all our gym friends back in the day, back in high school, because I was like, you guys don't know about Tiger Fitness, and I put everybody on, and like,
Oh yeah,
I mean, we all got our supplements from there. It was fantastic.
oh yeah. I love their family. It's crazy how everything's happened, but yeah, I mean, if you ever do need supplements, go to tigerfitness.com.
There we go. And so, one thing that I'm curious about is, I mean, two meniscus surgeries by eighth grade. I mean, that's pretty intense, to have to go through. And what were kind of the first things that you looked into, like you mentioned?
I know someone recommended like we did PT the first time, and I'm not kidding. I can't remember the exact days, but it was within a couple weeks of being cleared that I'm not even kidding. I went up for a layup in basketball, landed completely fine, but I knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
And landed, and I called my mom after. I'll never forget. It's like I tore it again. I know I did. I know it. I felt it, and everyone thought I was lying, but I ended up tearing it again. I got recommended to go to a trainer, and that's where I started to like love lifting. Is doing more athletic bases. PT's PT, but the first guy I went to, he's the one that truly got me to love the aspect of lifting, and especially athletically, I'll say. And that kind of set the bar forward. And I still had a lot of hiccups with my knee. I've had a full knee replacement at what? I think it was 29 or 30.
Wow.
So, and that's part of the reason why I love what I do, because I don't want people to go through that. It's not been the smoothest of transition, so to speak, just because there was so much previous damage even after those first two ones. I think I still had a fair amount of surgeries after that. They tried like a meniscus transplant, a femoral allograft, and that all failed.
Wow.
And then I had replacement. So that's kind of where the love started at, I'll say, a high school age, because I just fell in love with it and what it did to me. And then collegiately, that's when I say all the science and background aspects of it. You can learn as much as you want as a coach, and I think that's the interesting thing is with exercise science programs or kinesiology. It's you're going off a book, and it's a book, and that's all I'll get into at that point. So if that's where motivation became with science and reading, listening, any kind of journaling I can do for myself or anyone I was training. It got even more intense after that.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, and I can only imagine the frustration, first of all, only coming back a few weeks and then having to immediately go back for surgery again. But I mean, how grateful are you? And I'm sure, I mean, everybody else is, for all these people who come into your lives and then show you a different aspect of how to train and how to develop this love. I mean, it's such a fun process to get into it.
Yeah. And I will always go back and I'll remember, I remember the first time I was like bench 135 and all the little milestones everyone has. but I can go back and I'll say pinpoint, like I know exactly who got me to fall in love with it, and like who I'll say, each step of the way, kind of like you said, that had an impact on me, whether it was the, I'll say, education or science side, or, just, I'll say, the more grit side that some people turn to in strength and conditioning. So there's a lot of different facets I've been involved in.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And that's what Mike and I actually talked about that on his episode too, right? Is the balance between the science and then also just training your ass off.
Yep. I think it's got to be there has to be some kind of chaos.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the best way you can grow. And so I'm curious now, can you talk to me a little bit about your transition from, it was the collegiate sector, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
That for like a year and a half. And
Yeah.
then I kind of coached at Elmhurst for a year or two. And in layman's terms, the transition, I'll be honest, I didn't like college in the sense of coaching. Even whether it was like an intern at Northwestern or coaching like football at Elmhurst College and helping with their program, I didn't find or see a value in it for myself, because you're here at Northwestern as an intern, my experience, but you're dealing with the 1% of what everyone wants. And for me, it wasn't really challenging, and it wasn't fun to really see, because you don't see too much. They're already bigger, faster, stronger than the majority of people, and I found a lot of value, and I love being able to mentor athletes and see kids. I want kids to be able to. Yes, I want success in sports by all means, but being able to see a kid go from not having the most self confidence, or he doesn't think he or she is good in whatever terms they're thinking, to seeing a kid built up and see the growth, not only physically but mentally and maturity wise too, where they can walk into a room and own any room they go into, whether it's a school presentation, lunch conversation, whatever it is, and sports. That's where I see value. Like, that's challenging. Like, navigating with high school and middle school kids and figuring out how they all work and the intertwinings of all of it is a lot more fun for me, in the sense of it's more rewarding. Where college was just go do this, and I didn't really find it to be challenging, in the sense of, as a coach, you can kind of be a rah guy, show up, and you just follow like the code that like I like the intertwining networking of dealing with the high school and middle school kids, because you get to see the kids actually truly grow up and prosper, and that's the fun part for me, and I've seen the past 11 years.
Yeah, and this, I mean, that's really interesting to me, because I guess I've never really thought about it from that perspective. Because, I mean, again, like marginal gains more for these athletes that come in from a collegiate level, especially, like these high Power 5 schools, right? They were recruited for their athleticism already, so how much can we really improve that? If I get an inch on somebody's vertical over a summer, it's like hell yeah, that was a great summer,
Yeah.
But then if we're talking about a younger population of kids, and I think the confidence aspect is what's really interesting to me, because again, like you just mentioned, the first time you bench 135, right? I remember the first time I benched 135. I remember the first time I deadlifted 225. All those were moments that stuck with me forever. And so it's really awesome piece of what you spoke about, because you help these kids reach these moments. And I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, you probably reach more kids overall.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We reach a lot of kids, and like I'll say back in here, I think the biggest thing is, I want kids to have success in sports, but at the end of the day, like a kid's life can change by navigating through, I'll say, strength and conditioning. And what I mean is, does every kid have to play a sport? I've had kids that don't play a sport, and they just love coming in to train with that said group, or obviously us as the coaches. And years later, I've had so many kids come back. It's like, like this is literally what laid the framework of, whether it's who I am or like what I love to do, and that means the most to me. I have kids at Power 5 level. I will have plenty of kids drafted. That's awesome. That's obviously it's part of my job, but part of my job is building every single kid that comes in. It's easy to build a Power 5 kid because they're already built in some way or some fashion, whether it's the athletic part or they're just, they have the God-given strength, talent, or speed, whatever it is. You're not making, I'd say, I'm sure you can make changes by all means, but it's not hard to add to that. It's hard to make I know Coach Mike will agree with me, taking a kid who's, second string, third string, fourth string, whatever, and developing them into a starter, that's more challenging because they don't have the God-given ability. Help create, I'll say, lay that foundation and base and continually progress it. That's rewarding and that's challenging as a coach.
Yeah, wow. And, it's making me even reflect on my own training this offseason, right? We put out a graphic and it was like, yeah, look at everybody standing vertical and approach vertical, right? And I got a lot of messages like, oh, great job. And we actually have one of the players on our team has a 49-inch approach vertical. Absolutely nuts, right? But you understand this too, and this piece. He was jumping 48 and a half before I even got here, right? That's his ability, and so that I really truly had nothing to do with it besides just trying to do everything I can, especially with a freak athlete like that, just for him to understand how to control his body a little bit when he's going through those movements. And I do think, obviously, being a collegiate coach too, I always think there's people you can influence, and I don't think that's what you're trying to say whatsoever. But what I love, but what I love about what you're saying too is just those things like organized lifting and seeing a process. And what I always say to recruits as well too is you can't really cheat the weight room, right? And that's why I love it so much because it's a direct input to a direct output. And if you're not putting it in, you're not losing it, right? Like if I stepped on the scale this morning and I was like, how did I gain a pound overnight? I thought I did well, and I remembered I ate a whole pizza last night. Like these things it's not that complicated. But you do get to teach kids that exact process, and then that applies to life as a whole.
Yeah, and I think that's the fun part of dealing with the younger ages is you can kind of lay the foundation as you see fit, right? Every kid's different, and it's the same thing in at all settings. Everyone's different, but I truly get to lay if I can lay the correct foundation as I'll say a strength coach, movement wise, and I'll say based on the program, whether it is I'll say just long term health in general, or I'll say the athletic side, long term athletic development, where you can set that person up for long term success in their sport if that's what they choose to do. And that's where I think a lot of people, misconstrue the youth sector or private sector because and I don't blame coaches and I don't blame schools. You have to be at school to do everything, but there's 100 kids and there's one of you. We could I tell the schools all the time, I'm just here to help complement what you do and make your program better. That's all it is.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different facets of how all these conversations can go, but yeah, working with the youth I'll be honest, is definitely what I'm meant to do on this world and earth. It's where I found my purest joy of seeing it. It happened a couple weeks ago. One of our kids, he couldn't play last year, broke his he tore his UCL and he had surgery. He's double jointed, so it's crazy. But didn't play it all junior year. Went from 165 to 165 or 170, 215. Went from a 5.3 40 to I think it was high 4.5s. So completely changed the kid's trajectory, and obviously him doing a lot of 99% of the work. I'm one, and seeing that kid after a game where he had a couple sacks, multiple tackle losses, obviously double-digit tackles, and you just see the wide-eyed glow of that kid walking off the field and coming up, and you know that kid believes in you, and obviously I believe in the kid, but you just understand in that moment. I understood it's like, yep, this is exactly why I moved down here. This is why I wanted a new challenge, and like that was the epitome of everything I love about what I do. Is I know what the kid did, and obviously he knows it, but to have it show out, Mark says it best. You have to show up in order to show out, and he always showed up. And finally, everything came to fruition over the last 8 weeks, and that moment was for me. I don't think he probably thought anything of it, but I just sat there and sat back and was like, "Yep, this is exactly why I do what I do." Yeah, and there's no easier way to put it. Is being able to see those moments and realize like what you have with your collective group, whether it is at a college or high school or private gym.
That's amazing. And I mean, when you have that level of, I would say, passion and then confidence, and this is exactly what you're meant to do, you're going to be more successful as a coach. I mean, you're just going to be a better coach overall, right? Because you come in every day grateful to be able to do these things. So, I mean, I can see that passion. I mean, you exude it. It's evident with you.
I think it's like I know I don't like the term. It's like I can't remember. Was it like if you love what you do, like you're never going to work a day in your life. Like everyone says it. I think it's more so it's just, and you said it best, having passion or really just finding different ways to challenge yourself, as whether it is like as a salesman, as a marketing manager, whatever it is. Like how can you challenge yourself? If you are an athlete or you like working out, like how do you continue your process of like pushing yourself to keep that passion? Because I feel like a lot of people get so stagnant with anything, like in I'll say job or life, where they stop choosing to challenge themselves in certain regards. And it's the same thing with coaching. I obviously you challenge kids every day, but how do you challenge yourself, coach, when it's the same sticks and stones over and over again? How do you evolve, as everyone says? I think it's one of the bigger issues in strength and conditioning, because there's been a lot of progress over the years, but I think there's more that can be done as a coach, more so than just program.
And what do you think are the biggest things that can be done?
I definitely think they're probably one of the best books I've probably ever read. And I read way too much.
I don't think that's too bad of a problem.
Brett Bartholomew's Art of Coaching. If people can understand the different types of personalities, not just type A and type B, the different styles or archetypes, as he says. I can't remember if it's 9 or 12. I can't remember different archetypes of athletes, where you're understanding how each individual works. And obviously that's hard, but at the same time, like it's kind of your job, to be honest. I put little manila folders on every kid, and I write notes constantly on them, just so I can remember, if brothers, sisters, what game they just played, if I couldn't remember anything, just to continually develop that relationship, because there's 500 kids, you can't remember everyone, in the sense of you can't remember all the information. So that's why I try to write it down. I stole it from my dad, who's a doctor. He did it for decades. So I think, like, as a coach, working on like the interpersonal and intrapersonal communication with kids, and just, I'll say, relationship or culture aspects, something that everyone talks about, but I don't think people dive into it as much as they want to. It takes time. Like there's no doubt about it. And as a strength coach, you don't have a lot of time. You really don't have. What is it? Yeah, collegiate setting, is it off season? Is it like 5 hours or something.
4, yeah, 4.
So
Yep.
it's like that's the hardest part is how do you navigate that? Even in a high school setting, I'll say eerily similar because you're dealing with an hour after school. So I think the relationship aspect is one thing I think we can all get better at because that's really where everything like you want buy-in, like, that's where it happens. And then I think overall, like there's been so much development from different courses that are available for people, books, journals, whatever. But like I'll be honest. How many people actually can coexist with another coach, whether it's in the same state or blah blah blah? Because you see it on Twitter and social media. People just, they just belittle everyone, and I don't want to be a part of that. I don't like doing that. And Mike is one of the only ones over the last 10 years where he's 15 minutes down or 25 minutes down the road, and I'd drive to his facility all the time if I had time off or during the middle of the day, and I'd go hang out with him and talk shop and bullshit and help him, just watch him train, learn from him, because that's what it's supposed to be. Everyone treats it very egotistically, where I think there is a lot more options for like being a more collective group. It's just how do you navigate, again, personalities of coaches. It's everyone runs into it. Everyone thinks they know everything, but how do you get people to coexist? Like I have no issue doing that with schools. I have no issue doing that with if a kid goes to another trainer. Like I don't. My job is to help the kid. I'll be honest. Personally, if a kid goes to 2 different trainers, if me and some other dude, I'm gonna reach out to the other dude whether he likes it or not, because I need to know what's going on, and my job is to help that kid. It is what it is. I'll drop whatever ego I have for. I don't care. This is why I do what I do. But and I think forward, I'll say more forward thinking. The willingness, and I know is one of a question that everyone asks. How do you continually improve educational resources or output? And I think obviously you can read, listen, seminars, books, whatever lectures. But at the end of the day, like you have to be willing to try new things, input new things, try different variations that you might not be comfortable with doing. Because the only way to experiment with, I'll say a multitude of variations is to do it. That's one of my main reasons I wrote the article for Elite FTS, Adapt or Die, for undulating periodization, is like the willingness to tap into, multiple different spheres of strength and conditioning. Like, be willing. Like, I'll say years ago, I never thought like that because that's not what you're taught. You're not taught that. You might hear about it in like, what is it, the CSCS book. You might have a chapter, maybe a couple pages on progressive overload and undulating, and they might give you the verbiage of what it means, but that's really all you're getting. So I think as coaches, I'm sure many more pain points that people bring up all the time, but for me, I think it's stepping outside of what the normal box is, so to speak. And that's why I love Mike, because that was one of the easiest things I ever did, because I had kids that would go to him and kids that would go to me, and we both didn't care. We just wanted to figure out what was best for everyone, and that's how my relationship with Mike started.
Wow. I think that's such a solid point that you bring up from the standpoint of it's hard for other strength coaches to coexist. And I think I think people need to really take a long look at themselves and be honest with themselves of if they truly don't judge and truly try to open their minds to everybody else's opinions, right? I think like a good one is GOTA. I don't know if you're familiar with the GOTA training, right? Like it's so easy for all strength coaches to hate on GOTA training and just say it's useless and it's just a bunch of nerds looking at, like force vectors and stuff like that. But at the same time, there's been certain things I've implemented just like with our warm-ups or small tweaks I've made to our program from those. When you bring it up, it brought me back to this one moment when I was first at Texas Tech coexisting. I mean, I literally shared a weight room with the men's strength coach. And he's an awesome guy. I mean, amazing coach, John Riley. And it was tough for us to learn how to work with each other at first. And I think for me, it made my guard up a little bit more. And then this was a really humbling moment for me. So I can't remember what it was. I think it was like a 3-way lunge complex that I put in 1 month, and he saw it in our lift, and then he put it in the next month. And I was like kind of under my breath to one of the other interns. I was like, man, you like stole the lift, and everything. And he was like, and as an older intern, he's like, shut up. Like, what are you talking about? He's like, first of all, you don't own a single lift. Okay. Like that's not at all like it's never ever like it's something else. That's your lift because everybody's done something and they've done it better than you have in the past. But then two, he's also that should be a compliment, right? Because he saw something. He said, hey, I really like that in the program. And I'm going to implement it with my own guys because I believe in it that much. But at the same time too, like maybe it was already planned, like I think the psychology of coexisting with other strength coaches can be really difficult to navigate sometimes. And so,
Yeah. I 100% agree, and that it's. I mean, I'm sure everyone on here, you see it on Twitter, you see it on Instagram every day. The funny one for me is feed the cats.
yep.
So for people that don't know Tony, I remember years ago with one of the schools I worked with, I DM'd Tony and I was like, hey, like I have like 50 questions. And I brought the head coach of St. Charles North, the school I worked with, and I was like, hey, we both have questions on this because I worked with them for their strength conditioning. And I was like, I DM'd them. We sat down for probably 3 hours. And then you see everyone else, I'll say the the track side and then non-track side of speed, and we'll just say strength conditioning, where they bicker. They just keyboard warriors. And if you open your mind, like you said, you can find value. Like you might not agree with everything that's going on, and that's fine. Like you can develop your own personal opinion. But I think that's where, like both of us said, like stepping outside your box, and the willingness to open your mind and listen is you don't know what other people have that not in the sense of like you're stealing, but it's you're learning, you're educating yourself. Like there's some things I love with Feed the Cats. There's some things I'm in the middle. There's some things it's like it's just okay, that might be too much to incorporate with a team or whatnot. And that goes for any kind of program or style program. Like you take what you want and you build it to your own. But most people, if they don't like it, it's just they cut it out, and it's like a curse at that point.
Yeah.
They don't want to deal with it.
No, really, that's what made me think about my internship experiences, though, right? And I mean, exactly like you were talking about, you take and choose small things and put them into your program. And I mean, even the internship, I have one I really hated. I really did not like it. And I still use a lot of stuff from that internship, too, because they taught me a lot about how to be a better coach. I guess one thing I am curious about is you do speak about your relationship with Mike. What do you think makes that work so well for you guys?
I think it was just I'll say for me is obviously I've known of acceleration when I was even younger, so it wasn't anything new to me. But I think for our actual professional relation and personal, I text that dude all the time. We talk all the time, so it's really funny that this is coming up. I think it was just the willingness to open up for both of us personally. I think right at the same time he had his daughter, I had my son. So we were kind of going through the same, I'll say life crisis in a positive way. But at the same time, I think dropping things at the door and just saying, hey, like, this is what I'm doing. What are you doing? How can we essentially, collaborate in a way just so we know what's going on? And it went so much further than that for us. And, whether it was sharing ideas, different ways to do things or try things, it definitely became a professional relationship, became like a personal relationship too. Like I do have the utmost respect for him, and as a professional and as a personal relationship, I love that dude. He's awesome, and he's been nothing but unbelievable to work with and spend time with at their facility too. So I think for us to do that, I think it's just understanding, and like, it's so simple to say, looking back and understanding what your like actual job title is. You're there to help kids, and I'll say in our area, in the sense of private sector with high school and middle school. You're there to help kids. That like, it is about the kids. That is hands down. That is all it is about. So I think we both know where we stood on that. So that was really easy. And they're just good dudes over there. They really are. Him and his brother are phenomenal. They do so much for kids. It's literally mind blowing. So I think that's why it was so easy for us. We had the same goals and same thought pattern, essentially, and we were both very open with each other right away. There was poking and prodding.
Yeah.
So it was relieving because you don't get that many times.
No, but you just said the main reason is we have the same goals, right? And all of us have the same goals as coaches. Yeah. Every single one of us has the same. We are there to help the athletes, right? We're there to help the kids, and I mean that's what matters the most. And so, I mean, if we can kind of put that aside, right, and put aside the poking and prodding, like you're saying, and just understand we all have one common goal, then I think it would make the relationships a lot easier amongst strength coaches too, instead of the ego-driven side.
Yep, absolutely. You can like you were talking about earlier. Like, I think that's where the more I'll say forward thought process of being a coach is the willingness to do that. Right? It's you can learn a lot from other people. Like, I do it all the time. I'll reach out to people that I've done it to Mark Hoover, who's in North Carolina. The dude is wicked smart with technology. It is mind blowing. And I just, hey, I have a couple questions, like, just bought X, Y, and Z. I'm going to do it this way, but want to see how you do it and whatnot. And open book, spend hours with them. I can text them anytime I want. So there are people like that, but I definitely think it's one of the issues in the strength world that I get. You want to be protective of like your own identity, so to speak, but I think at the same time I think people think they create something and they, like, I'll say, they have the secret sauce, but in reality it's probably already been done in the last 10 decades.
Oh yeah.
Like someone saying they created this process, when in reality, like, okay, the Russians actually really designed that. You can't say you created it. You have any idea what's actually going. But I think like people think reality is most likely someone already did it, and it's probably already published. So, and that's what I go back on, is read so many different books from so many different eras. Like, I've had a couple of Russian manuals translated to English, and it's like, oh, okay, I never thought of any of this, because obviously I can't read Russian, so I translate. And it happens all the time, and I think it's the same thing with with coaches, is they think they secret sauce, they don't want to share it because it's their their identity, so to speak. But reality is that we all have our own ways of doing it. Are we willing to sit down and learn from each other to literally just better the industry and better, the younger generations of coaches before us, because I can't imagine it was like this without social media.
Yeah.
So, especially at conferences, I'm sure there's a lot more, collaboration and thought process when the social media wasn't here.
Mm.
So, it's always an interesting aspect of the strength world.
I think that's such a solid point too, right? Because people become preconceived when they see the social media aspects, and then they see that coach in person, and they already have this whole story built up for this person.
Oh
You have
yeah,
no clue about their lives.
yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I know, like what was it? The national, what is it? National Strength and Conditioning Association, NHSSCA. I hope I didn't butcher it, but that was in like the Nashville area. So obviously, I just moved here, and like through Twitter and other social media, I talked to some dudes and I met up with them there. Did the same thing with other coaches like all around the country. Like anywhere I travel, like I'll find a gym or a school or a university and say, hey, can I stop by and just hang out, talk shop, watch you train, and do your thing? And like I love doing that. Like that's probably one of like the coolest things you can do as a strength coach is like, I mean, you go anywhere in the world, it doesn't matter. Like you can find some kind of facility, some kind of coach, and be able to absorb what you want. And that's like anytime we go anywhere, I will always try to find some kind of school, other gym, whatever, to, just go network, talk, and if they're open to it, great. If they're not, okay, that's fine too. But I think that's the fun part of broadening your horizons, as my parents would always tell me is to do when I was younger. I finally listened years later.
Well, just like every other piece of parental advice I think anybody's ever gotten is listening to it a lot longer down the line.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's such a great challenge, though, right? I mean, like, I think for anybody listening right now, like, are you doing the efforts to collaborate? Because we always talk about, like you mentioned in the beginning, it's textbooks, right? And you can learn so much through reading and so much through listening. But my main experiences when I've learned the most is always by internships or meeting with other coaches and having somebody on a one-on-one level break it down for me, right? Because one, they can actively help me understand it if I'm not understanding it in a textbook, right? It's not like if I'm reading triphasic, like Cal Dietz isn't going to call me up and say, hey, you didn't understand this paragraph. Let's go through it again, right?
Yep.
But if I'm speaking with him in person, I can ask those questions to further develop it. And I think that's just such a good challenge, and it makes you a better coach, right? Because I'm thinking about it, and we've got, I mean, right around Boone, I've got 2 other colleges that I know for a fact have strength coaches, and I haven't reached out yet at all to collaborate. And I've been here for a year, so I mean, I think that's a challenge to myself too, to figure out how can I reach out to these other coaches so that we can all get better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's and in the end, it's not hard to do.
No,
It's really not. That's why like it's just fascinating with Mike and I. It's even more of a weird relationship, because theoretically, like people always seem to say, well, you guys are competitors. It's like, yeah, well, we really don't. There's enough kids to go around. We really don't care.
yeah,
Like it sounds dumb, but like that's literally what it is. Like we really didn't care. Like it's funny, but yeah, I think for other coaches out there, be open. Like I mean, my door is always open. Like I do not care. I don't care if you're in the private sector. I don't care if you're in the collegiate, combines. Like I don't care. And I've had people reach out, we're going to be there in Nashville. Like, can we get a workout in, or like, talk? It's like, absolutely. I don't care. Like, I can learn just as much as you can learn from me.
yeah.
And I'm always open to do that, and I'll always reach out to people. I think it's a challenge that everyone needs to think about, because we don't know everything. A lot of us do claim, because it is part of like our alter egos that we. But it can be just another valued guide for you, just like a book. But even better news, in person, you can hear pitfalls and positive, negatives of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now I do have to ask this because you are such an avid reader, and you've dived into Russian text before. Have you made it all the way through super training?
Yes, but I always end up reading things like, I'll say, depending on the book, like Triphasic, I think I read like 3 times.
Yep.
Because you read it and you're like, okay, all right. Now I read it again. Now I think I can do it another way within that framework, and now I can do it like this. Same thing with super training. Like I've done it with so many books over the years, where it's like you read it and you're like, you take things from it, think you got like what you want, and then you go back and you're like, okay, I totally missed that input.
Yeah.
Could have done that. Could have done that. So I'm actually like, I'm almost. What am I on? I'm on. Oh, I can't. Is it? It's Cameron. I'm gonna butcher his last name. Cameron Jossie's book with what was that, Fergus Connolly?
Okay. Oh.
Fergus Connolly. I think it is. The game changer or the process. I can't remember what it's called. But there's like 1, 2, 3. I think 4 different like levels of it.
Yep.
So I just went through the first 3. I'm on the last one. I want to say 4. And I just reread those again. So my next one is literally on the desk at home. It's super training, and then I'm going to go through. I think it was. I think it was more of like a culture / like I'll say personal like development book.
Yeah.
I read like, obviously I love reading what I do, but for me, like, I've become so good at navigating with people that I've become very intertwined of reading like not only personal development books, but how do you almost like psychology books.
Yep.
So because you are in a non-doctor way, you are kind of a psychologist.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You have to deal with a lot of stuff and a lot of people, so I'm always intrigued by that too. But yeah, definitely gonna have to read super training again.
Yeah, the discipline is insane because I made it about a quarter of the way through, and I couldn't. I mean, my ADD was going absolutely crazy. But
oh God, I'm with you. But that's the thing is like I'll try and reread a lot of things, especially if they're so long. Like, you got to reread certain parts, and I'll usually down that it's like, all right, go back and reread this, or look at this, because as much as I love reading and I like note taking because it just helps me memorize things and like put it in my own perspective. I definitely have to go back and do all that book.
oh yeah. And I love one thing you brought up too. I mean, the piece of in a non-doctor way, you really are a psychologist and how you operate, right? And it's what I always talk about is framing, is how you frame things for specific athletes. And like there was one this morning. I mean, like it was like we went 12 rounds of like this psychological battle almost of like how to navigate. Like it's a person who has dealt with injuries for a long time and how to navigate motivation for the day, and then also how to navigate not really like discussing the injury itself, but areas around the injury that affect it. And it was just it's so funny you bring that up, because specifically like how you talk with one athlete and everybody here listening knows you can't talk with another athlete that way, right? You have to change how you do these things, but that's what you said you've been successful at as well too on that relationships building side.
Yeah, I think it's always the interesting part, because all these kids and athletes are different. So it's and I'm sure we all see it at every level. Just the amount of chaos in the sense of personalities that are in one room.
Oh yeah,
and trying to get that entire collective to navigate towards I'll say the culture on the I'll say the big picture side, like how do you get them to navigate to the standards, the expectations, and whatnot, because they're all in different trajectories of different thought processes. So it's always fun, and like I'll have I'll never forget. I'd always do like what was it? Basically like athlete to athlete interviews. Like I'd always talk to all my kids, but I'd always have at some point in some time during the off season, at least like 2 to 3 where my kids have to interview someone else. They have to interview another.
Yeah.
And really just to get kids to understand how to communicate because they're so used to that where it's like, I want you to know more like about each other because it's only going to drive things further in the sense of understanding that player, but also you don't know what people are going through. Like you can't put everyone's shoe on and think you're going to understand what's truly going on. Like you might not have any clue that Joey's dad has cancer and like he hasn't said a word, and then all of a sudden you find out like okay, that is a ticking time bomb as a kid. And if I found that as a kid, it's most kids don't know how to handle it. How do you address that? And most coaches, think they. I'd say like most of us, as humans, just you want to be there for them at the end of the day. That's what it's about. But how do you like actually need that to do it the proper way? I think it's interesting that we just brought that up because I remember I think it was the Stanford Colorado game. One of the Colorado receivers, number 4, one of his best friends got shot like that day or that week.
Wow.
And he passed away. They were talking about how Dion and like the school, like basically flooded him with resources. In the sense of anything like psychologically, and a priest and whatnot. And I thought that was really interesting. I mean, especially bring up on primetime TV that they're putting that time and effort into what's going on because at the end of the day, like sports will only last so long forever. So my thought process always is, how am I going to not only affect a kid now as an athlete, but how am I going to get them to essentially prosper as they grow up and develop?
Yeah.
Like, there's the long-term athletic development for me. Like, obviously that's number 1, but number 2, like my job is to not only create better athletes, but in all honesty, it's to create better generations that are before us. And I think the only way you can do that is by showing people things in the weight room and like when it comes to like I'll say the mental and physical part of things, but getting people to understand like you can always do something for someone else. Like you can always help other people, whether you know what's going on or not, and being able to push that narrative forward because at some point in some time, you playing football or soccer or basketball, it's going to end.
Yep.
And you can't unless you're LeBron, you can play for however many years with Tom Brady. Like, all right, that's a lot different. That's 0.000 of whatever of us. So how do you have a lasting impact? And that's why my brand back home and the brand now I'm partnered with Legacy Carbon. Like, that's why it's called Legacy. It's like, how do I create that lasting impact? Not only for myself as a coach and as a human, like I want to have that impact on kids, but how do I get kids to understand like the impact they're going to have on others, whether it is family or friends, and their kin, their children over the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Like it's so much bigger than what we all see. We see, I see my 4 walls right now, and that's what most people see. Like I see my weight room, I see my racks, everything else, and that's really all anyone's image really is. It's all right. I have my 4 walls. We're gonna throw some weight around. There's way more to it, and I know we all know that. It's just how do we get coaches to think more progressively like that? Not only as a coach, but a lot of us are dads. we have, we have a daughter, we have a son. If you don't, like, you still have, I'll say, your extended family from the people you train. Like, that's, whether you're at a college or not. Like, everyone says it's, a sisterhood or brotherhood. Well, is it, or are you just infatuated by saying?
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing. Is I want to have a lasting impact on every kid that comes in, whether they play a sport or not. Like, that's that's part of my job too, is to create better people. Like, that's the reason it's called legacy, is have that lasting legacy. Like, Kobe Bryant will be remembered forever, not only for basketball, but just, you hear about the mentality of him. You look at any musicians over the last 40 decades. Like, there's people that still will be talked to about this day. Beatles are an easy one. They're always going to be around. They're always going to be, a legacy that will always be talked about. And that's where I kind of went with how I got my name.
Yeah.
I have that impact, like, and that's why I'll say I try to be progressive in that thought process, and in a lot of other ways too.
Yeah, I think that's like the mic drop right there. I mean, my goodness, you're 100% correct. Like, I mean, it's more than the sport. It's more than lifting. It's about life.
Yep.
Wow.
100%.
Wow, amazing. Well, Bryce, I could talk to you all day. I mean, I'm serious. And my fiance is from Chattanooga, so the next time we're over there, I'm gonna have to stop by Franklin. It's just a couple hours over. Yeah.
Only like a couple hours away, so please.
Oh yeah.
By all means, come by.
I would love to, seriously, because I mean, like I said, I could go all day with this. I know we're on a slightly tighter schedule, though. So, I mean, thank you so much for your time. And again, this is I'm going to mention in the intro, too, it's always really energizing for me to speak with coaches who are passionate and who understand exactly what it's all about. And I feel like you definitely do. And I appreciate you spreading that message for all our listeners.
Well, I appreciate it. And I love tuning in. So it's a joy for me to be able to come on here, and if people do have questions, they can reach out. I'm an open book, just like yourself. So I mean, I appreciate the offer coming on, and for, like I said, anyone that needs anything or has questions, please reach out. Like, I'm always around, so it doesn't matter. But I appreciate what you're doing, and pushing the narrative in a unique way for people to open up in all reality, just open up in general. And I think it's what a lot of people need, whether you're a coach or an athlete. I think everyone needs.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Be more open. And that's the number one thing I've worked on with my fiance is not just coming home and saying I had a good day, breaking down the day and being more open. So, what would be the best way for people to reach you?
I'd say probably through social media. Twitter and Instagram are just first and last name, Bryce Biel. Excuse me, BRYCE BIEL. Twitter, Instagram. I think it'll be the easiest way for people to just send me a message through there. If you need my email, you can find it on there too, so it doesn't matter. And then website-wise, it's legacy@carbon.com. So legacy, AT, carbon, like the molecule.com. And yeah, that would be the easiest way.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Bryce. I really appreciate your time.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.